we're going to talk about top 10 sins and struggles. Now, I do want to mention right off, next week, John's going to fill in. He'll step away from the series for 1 week. Next week is my dad's 87th birthday. We're doing a big do for him with dinner and everything, so I will be up there. We're going to take all the kids, going to try to get all the grandkids and the great-grandkids there. So he'll be 87, and we're going to try to give him a special day next week. So John will be here next week and take a step away, and then we'll get back into it. So we're going to start top 10 sins and struggles. How many of you remember the old David Letterman show when he did his top 10 list at night, late night? The top 10 this, the top 10 that. All right, this didn't come from that. This series, the idea for this series came from a church in Oklahoma where the preacher said, all right, let's do a survey. Let's find out what you visualize as, or what you consider to be the top 10 sins/struggles. Not everything necessarily a sin, but the top 10 sins/struggles that the church faces. I think this was a church in, Choctaw, Oklahoma. So we're going to base it on that because I thought the 10 results they came back with are pretty applicable and could be applicable to just any church about anywhere across the country. And we may go to meddling right away in this one, because coming in at number 10 on the list, well, it helps if I turn that on. But coming on at number 10 on the list, laziness. Is that a problem in the church, laziness, that you think of? We're going to look at some of the ways that it can be, how it can be, and how we try to make sure that it's not an issue. Boy, Roy, I'm appreciative of that right now. That's working out really well. Because I can see what you guys see by looking at the back wall, so that's really handy. So, all right, top 10 sins and struggles, laziness. All right, we all have seen one of the great cartoon characters of all time who is known for being lazy. My man Garfield. I'm not lazy, I just don't care. Or, I can, but I won't. And one more, I'm not lazy, I'm a master of energy conservation. I can empathize with that one. I'm lazy, I'm a master of energy conservation. I came across this and I thought this was pretty funny. I wonder, do lazy people go to heaven or do they send somebody to pick them up? Now, there are some humorous things about laziness, but there are some serious things. Some other quotes about laziness. Tomorrow is the only day in the year that appeals to a lazy man. Because I can wait and do it tomorrow, and then tomorrow I can wait and do it tomorrow. And, tomorrow is always the good day for the lazy man. Sophocles, Greek tragedy writer. Laziness is the mother of all evils. Benjamin Franklin, idle hands are the devil's plaything. Because generally most of us, if we're going to be doing something, and this one I thought was pretty powerful. Don't become lazy about the only life you have. And I think as we're going into this today, that's a pretty good focus to maintain is don't become lazy about the only life that you have. You get one chance. So, top 10 sins and struggles. Number 10 is laziness. This came from an article in Christianity Today back in 1974, 48 years ago. So this tells you this is not something new. This is not something that's just developed in modern culture. 48 years ago, an article in Christianity Today said one reason why laziness is hard to combat is that it is sometimes hard to identify. It is not necessarily characterized by inactivity. Lazy people can be very active. They may keep busy doing things that do not count for much because they want to avoid more demanding tasks. You ever known somebody that was lazy that just sort of Well, they did stuff, but they didn't do the stuff they really needed to do. I really don't want to do that. That's too hard, but I'll do this. I'm going to look like I'm staying busy, but I don't want to do the hard stuff. Laziness is a worldview. For many, laziness is a lifestyle, a worldview. We teach ourselves to think that everyone should want nothing to do if they can make it happen. We romanticize laziness. Our lives reflect the song from the 1980s. How many know what that song's from? Everybody's working for the weekend. We work so we can just do whatever we want. We tend to think that if we didn't have all this work to do, from a Christian perspective, we tend to think that if we didn't have all this work to do, then we could really be vibrant Christians. We could spend all of our time reading the Bible, then we could be powerful, bold believers. We have come to believe that the reason we work is so that we can rest. Work in this way of thinking is a necessary evil. Later in this article I pulled this from, it says, however, biblically, we do not work so that we can rest. We rest so that we can what? Work. Very first verse of the Bible has God doing what? Working. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It doesn't say, in that first verse, it doesn't say, oh, well, God was lounging around, he was resting, and he said, I'll create sometime down the road. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, let's go to creation. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him male and female. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Did God tell Adam and Eve, hey, just go, relax, enjoy, sit around, lounge around, and just enjoy creation? Or did he give them work to do? Ever heard somebody say that, well, Adam and Eve just really messed it all up. We were all going to get to go to the garden. We were all going to get to lounge around. We were going to get to eat all this fruit. And we were going to get to do all this stuff. We were just going to have it just do nothing. Was that ever God's plan? From the beginning of creation? Gave Adam and Eve something to do right out of the gate. I saw one commentator say that if you'll notice, they should talk about laziness and idleness being the devil's playground. The Bible doesn't tell us that Adam and Eve were really doing anything when they were tempted. It doesn't describe them doing any work. Just as they were there, he tempted them and boom. God gave man something to do from the very beginning. Dictionary description of the lazy person: does not like that which requires physical or mental effort. Now, why would that be? Why would there be people that don't like to do things that require physical or mental effort? You guys are getting way too easy this morning. Just sit and quiet. What are a couple of reasons, maybe? Yeah, maybe. But in that, I don't necessarily, that means, or maybe they perceive it to be. The task may not be too difficult, but they perceive that it is. A couple of reasons we might want to look at: the people do not like that which requires physical or mental effort. Maturity. Is an immature person more likely to be lazy? Some would rather play than work. Now, there are times I would rather play than work, but the maturity comes into being where you know that the work's got to be done. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with the play, but maturity comes with knowing sometimes before you get to play, you have to work. Where the immaturity comes in is that the play takes priority over everything. Some people like to play and call it their work. Thereby, they get to choose what requires the least amount of effort. What is outside of maturity? What's another reason somebody might just say, no. Take us out of our comfort zone, which sort of gets close to point number 2 on this. Another reason that some do not like that, which requires physical or mental effort, is selfishness. I want to do what I want, how I want it, when I want it. Because physical and mental effort require giving of yourself. So you have to be willing in some part to be selfless to do some things. One of the part of the real problem with that is a lazy person loves himself too much, give any of himself away. I'd rather do what makes me happy. I'd rather do what makes me comfortable. I'd rather do what I want to do than something that is maybe less beneficial to me or makes me feel less good than that. So maturity and selfishness. Any of the reasons you think of that someone just wants to be lazy? Seems somebody else will do it for them. And Tyler, I think that goes also right in with the selfishness and maturity. Because with maturity, at some point you realize, you need to do some of this. Collins Dictionary description of the lazy person. If someone is lazy, they do not want to work or make any effort to do anything. The Bible's description of a lazy person. First of all, a lazy person is wasteful. Proverbs 18:9. He also who is slack in his work is brother to him who destroys. Saw a commentary of a gentleman who wrote something on this, and he talked about a secretary that he used to have. And he said she would find busy work to avoid doing the work she didn't want to do. She would do things like clean her desk, put stationery in order, talked on the phone, took long breaks at lunch with a pre-break routine. In other words, she had to get ready to go on her break. And then she had the post-break routine, and then she wrote birthday cards, shopping lists while she was at the desk, and when she got asked to do more things, I'm too busy. That gets back to the aspect we talked about earlier. Lazy people sometimes are busy, but it's what they're busy with. Lazy person wastes their time, energy, talent, and opportunities by not using or improperly using their abilities. You got talent, you got skills, but not using them for the things you ought to be using them for only the things that benefit you. A lazy person is wasteful. Lazy person, another biblical description is, a lazy person is there's a lion out there. There's a lion out there. What's the problem? it kept him from doing what he ought to do. A lazy person is an expert in making excuses why things should be done tomorrow, why things are not finished, why things are too hard, too far, too complicated, too much. What kind of excuses have you heard a person make about reasons to not do something that you knew that they were capable of doing? The time gets back to, generally, you have time for things that you decide you want to do or are important to you to do. If you look around at a lot of people, when they say they don't have time, you can look close enough and find out if it's important to them or it's something they want. They'll find time. This comment, for the lazy person, an obstacle is something which will provide them with an excuse to avoid an effort of some kind. For a diligent person, an obstacle is something that forces them to figure out another way of getting the job done. Have you ever seen the people that the first time they hit a bump in the road, can't do it, it's not possible? A diligent person, an obstacle for a diligent person is something that forces them to figure out another way to get things done. Another thing, biblical description of a lazy person, they are wise in their own eyes. What are we meaning with this one? Yep. They have the answer for everything. They may not do it, but they got the answer for it. Proverbs 26:16, the sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can give a discreet answer. Comment was here that lazy people know everything. They know all the answers. You can't tell them anything. But then generally, how is their view when it comes to the task? Well, somebody else could do it, but this is how you do it. This is how you do it, but I'm not going to do it. I had an employee that worked under me one time came to me with a problem one day. He says, what can I do? I said, well, you can do it this way, and this will do this for you. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, I said, or you could do it this way, and this will do it, and this will resolve the problem this way. Well, I don't want to do that either. My reply at that point was, figure it out. They are wise in their own eyes. Truth of the matter is, lazy people avoid 2 things at all costs. Effort is number 1. Number 2 is the truth. Now, we're talking about definitions of laziness and what it means. Are there dangers, are there issues that come about as a result of laziness? Specifically, not only their lives, but are there dangers when laziness creeps into the church? Dangers of laziness leads to poverty. Proverbs 19:15, laziness casts into a deep sleep, and an idle man will suffer hunger. Now that refers specifically, you can look at that and say, well, that applies to physical. I think that it can apply to spiritual too. If you're spiritually lazy, you will suffer what? Spiritual hunger. How are some ways that we are spiritually lazy? You guys need the person out here. How are some ways that we get spiritually lazy? Stay at home instead of coming to church. Don't read and pray like we should. Any others? Yeah. When there's a need, send somebody else. We'll take care of it. I'm talking to people about Christ. If we are spiritually lazy, we will hunger. What eventually happens to us if we're not doing any of this? You know, Jesse pointed out not coming to church. What happens there is it gets a little easier each time, doesn't it? You know, oh, I didn't go this week. I just didn't feel like it. I didn't go this week. Next week, that's a little easier. Well, I didn't go. The preacher started a series. I'm going to be behind schedule on that. It'll be okay if I don't go this week. Suddenly, you're not doing the things you need to do spiritually, and you begin to develop spiritual hunger. Spiritual poverty, it can lead to physical poverty. It can lead also to emotional poverty. Lazy people make no effort for physical things, so they won't do it for emotional or spiritual rewards as well. Makes it sound, it's one of those things, laziness, we make jokes and the lazy characters have always been made fun of on TV shows and cartoons. But when you look at some of this, how spiritually impactful can this be? Not just on us as individuals, but on a congregation as overall. If you have laziness that builds and becomes, ingrained, laziness leads to poverty. Laziness leads to shame. Proverbs 10:5, he who gathers in summer is a son who acts wisely, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who acts shamefully. How does laziness, we would look at that and say, well, gee, it only really impacts me. I'm just being lazy. I'm not doing anything. How does laziness bring shame? You eventually start realizing what you're missing out on. How does it impact those around you? Take it out on them. Let's take this to, if you're lazy around home, the house, how does it end up impacting your spouse, your kids, others in your household? The things they come to rely on you for begin to fall off. This is sort of the selfishness aspect of laziness, is you become so focused on doing what you want, you forget that there are those around you who need you, who depend on you to provide the things that you're supposed to be doing. Now, let's bring that into the church. If we are spiritually lazy towards the church, then there are those in the church who count on us for certain things that we begin to fail them at. It becomes a bigger problem than I just want to lay around and do nothing. A distaste of making an effort brings the opposite. It brings shame. Another danger of laziness, it leads to dissatisfaction. Proverbs 13:4. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, but the soul of the diligent is made fat. Ultimately, what becomes the problem for the lazy person? They still want stuff, don't they? They still want things. They want to feel a certain way. And yet, if you're not making the effort to do the things necessary to reach out and attain or acquire those things, what happens? You really don't get what you want, and you're not going to be happy or satisfied. Eventually, one's laziness robs that person of the many joys in life that others have. Lazy person looks over at something and says, well, boy, he's got a really nice car. Lives in a really nice house. He's worked really hard to get there and attain those things. Well, I want that, but I'm just not in the mood to get out and do something. What about spiritually? Well, gee, so-and-so looks happy. They're doing a lot for the church, and they're doing a lot for the cause of Christ, and I wish I could get those feelings and feel like they do and smile and be happy like they are. But I'm just not going to get out and do it. Somebody else will do it. And the lazy person still wants the things that they want, but they don't want to do what it takes to get them. Lazy people who don't acknowledge the truth grow envious of others and depressed about their own condition. I want to restate that again. I want to read that one again and just listen. Lazy people who don't acknowledge the truth grow envious of others and depressed about their own condition. Another danger of laziness. Laziness leads to slavery. Your turn again. How does laziness lead to slavery? How does laziness lead to slavery? Proverbs 12:24, the hand of the diligent will rule, but the slack hand will be put to forced labor. Lazy people still want things, but will become indebted to others for them. It takes no effort to create debt, but lots of effort to pay them off. Let's qualify this. Not all poor people are lazy, but most lazy people end up being poor financially, emotionally, and spiritually. Again, most lazy people end up being poor financially, emotionally, and specifically of importance as we're talking about it in this class, they end up being poor spiritually. If you're not spending time in prayer, if you're not spending time in the Word, if you're not spending time with your fellow Christians, if you're not spending time being in worship when you ought to, what happens? No matter how much you may want to feel and be happy, unless you're putting in the effort to do the things you need to do, you're still going to end up poor spiritually. So, now we've talked about the definitions, we've talked about problems that it results in. How do we deal with it? If we find ourselves drifting into that territory of being lazy, thinking somebody else will do it, especially spiritually, how do we deal with it? One is the acceptance that you got to work. We go back to Genesis. Adam and Eve were assigned things to do right out of the bat. For even when we were with you, we used to give you this order. If anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either. It's like Thessalonians 3:10. There were those who were just trying to take advantage of the charity of others and say, well, somebody will take care of me. This says if you're able and capable, you need to be doing something. First Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. This pertains especially to physically laziness, but it talks about, if you're not taking care of yours, what kind of example does that set? And it says those who are not taking care of their own are what? Worse than an unbeliever. Is there really anything much worse for a Christian to be told that you're worse than an unbeliever? Doing it now. Don't wait. If you find yourself getting caught up into lazy patterns, don't wait until later. Do something about it now. That's one of those things of laziness I can always put off till tomorrow. I'll just let it go down the road. One of the great statements I had a teacher make to me about tomorrow is, the one thing about tomorrow is what? As it pertains to laziness and putting things off. The one thing about tomorrow is, it never comes. When you're looking at things and saying, I'm going to put them off till tomorrow, well, tomorrow, for that person who's lazy and trying to just get away from it, it never comes, because when tomorrow gets here, it is what? Today. So then it becomes, well, I'll do it again. I'll do it tomorrow. Ecclesiastes 11:4. He who watches the wind will not sow, and he who looks at the clouds will not reap. If you get caught up just watching the things around you, what happens? You can get caught up just watching, thinking somebody else will do it. He who watches the wind will not sow. He who looks at the clouds will not reap. Ecclesiastes 11:5 and 6. Just as you do not know the path of the wind and how bones are formed in the womb of the pregnant woman, so you do not know the activity of God who makes all things. Sow your seed in the morning and do not be idle in the evening. For you do not know whether morning or evening sowing will succeed, or whether both of them alike will be good. What do you take from that verse, those verses? What does that tell you? You never know which is going to work. You never know what time you're going to have. Cultivating a Christian attitude about work. 1 Thessalonians 4:11 and 12. And to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life and attend to your own business and work with your hands, just as we commanded you, so that you will behave properly toward outsiders and not be in any need. Work connected to behaving properly. And to make it your ambition, okay, that's with that one. Colossians 3:22 and 23. That ends with, whatever you do, do your work how? Heartily. As for the Lord rather than for men. When the attitude of laziness starts creeping into your mind and into your life, think of this. You're not doing the work for you. You're doing the work, you need to do your work as if you're doing it for the Lord, which you really are anyway. Colossians 3:24, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, it is the Lord Christ whom you serve. For the spiritual person, final points here. For the spiritual person, work is a witness. How is it that your work is a witness to others? And let's take this, let's bring this especially into home here, and let's bring it into as it pertains to our spiritual lives and the church, and we'll bring it here and not out at home this time. How does your work in here, or how does your work as a Christian, things you do for the church or for Christ, how is that a witness? Very good. You didn't hear Catherine's statement. Someone said that you may be the only Bible that someone ever reads. If you're involved in projects like feeding the hungry, clothing those, helping those out, like the situation we had around here in December with all the tornado stuff, that is a witness of your faith when you do those kind of things. Now, let's qualify that. While your work is a witness to others, your laziness can also be a witness as well. Not the good kind. Do people notice someone who does not live their faith? Do people notice people who are spiritually lazy? Here's the thing. When people see, you are giving a witness, whether you're trying to or not, when you live your faith. Or do not live your faith. There is no neutral here. You're giving a witness. You're either saying it's okay to be lazy in faith because it doesn't matter, or you're living your faith in a way that people say, wow, I want that. Or I want to know more about that. Also, for the spiritual person, work is an expression. How is your work in the church an expression? Why do we do things? Why do we do work and projects in the church? Why do we exhibit love for others? Should not our work and activity in the church be a sign of the expression of our love for Christ, who expressed such unimaginable love for us? So if you're spiritually lazy, what does that express about your love for Him? Have you ever thought, what if Jesus had said, I'm not in the mood to do this today, on the day of the cross. Let's put this off. Maybe I don't. When you don't feel like doing it, think about that. For the spiritual person, work is an offering. We take up an offering or collection here, we give money, which is a good thing to give to the work of the church and to help, whatever cause is needed. But I think sometimes we think that giving money is all that we have to give. And sometimes that becomes the easy solution, doesn't it? I'll write a check and somebody else will do something. Now, I'm not saying we're not supposed to give, because we are. We're commanded to give. But I think sometimes we take that as the option of, we'll take care, I'll write the check, that takes me off the hook for anything else. But we are also commanded to work as well. Top 10 sins and struggles. We may have gotten to meddling this week with laziness, but there's where we're going to go. It's actually about 12 of them because there were 2 ties on the list. John will be here next week. John will have something away from the series. Number 9 in 2 weeks will be anger, as we talk about the top 10. Thank you guys, and hopefully we'll get something out of this over the next